Mr. Burks, you're late. You're late. Come on. Yeah, he's standing back there chit-chatting.
Back there working.
Walker?
You must think it's his birthday or
I know,
something.
I mean, honestly, he gets a special pass.
Yeah. My clock says 7 o'clock. That's when we started. We got a long agenda. Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, July 13th meeting of the Asheboro City Council. Appreciate all of you being here. We generally start with a moment of meditation and a pledge of allegiance, and I will say that if you're so inclined, today is Mr. Moffitt's birthday, and it would be good to say a prayer for him. So, if you will, at this time, rise and join me with a moment of silent meditation, and we will follow that with the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Right on cue. The fire truck is always out during our council meeting. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And happy birthday, Mr. Moffitt. Happy birthday. This is the appointed time, each meeting where we give you the opportunity to address the council on any items of city business or concern in our public comment period. Is there anyone in the audience tonight that would, and keep in mind that there will be other, if you are here for a particular item on the agenda, generally there will be a time during each of those items for public comment. But if you have something you'd like to share with the council, now would be a good time to do that, and I will invite anybody in the audience that is inclined to do so. Go ahead, Mr. Batten.
Yes, my name is Bill Batten. I live in Asheboro. I've done some research recently. I spoke to the North Carolina Wildlife Commission and found out, spoke to their deer expert. Yes, they have a deer expert that knows everything there is about deer. This gentleman's name is Moriah Bogus, and he told me some very positive things that I want to share with the city of Asheboro and point out some steps, if the city of Asheboro is interested, they can take. Bottom line is this. They have deer management programs, and they have experience with this, and what is required is the city must reach out to them. And for example, they have, and it happens to be in our same district. We're in district number 5 of the North Carolina Wildlife Commission, and Durham is also in that same district, and Durham has implemented a deer management program. It's been very successful, and the Wildlife Commission is tracking the results, and they're making small changes with Durham's agreement and such. And what I'd like to do tonight is pass out who the city of Asheboro, if they so are interested, the name of the district biologist. This district biologist's name is Joe Folta, and this is the contact information should Asheboro consider a deer management program. Thank you.
And as a little backstory, I'll tell you that we have been approached over the last few years by homeowners concerned about the increasing deer population. And most recently, Mr. Batten asked that we put this on the agenda and start a little bit of research into this. I know Randleman is currently doing that. Is that right, Mr. Burke?
Yeah, and
Frankleville has one, I know.
yeah, and item 12 is on our agenda tonight is we're going to talk about potential code provisions to authorize an urban archery program. So the city attorney's done the staff work, and, you know, last month or two, we had Sergeant King with.
It's getting to be, the population is getting to be greater and greater, and even daily, even more destructive, so, we will be discussing that. And,
One small thing.
yes, sir.
The research. All it takes is a small amount of what they call pressure, and they change their behavior. They go back to resorting being fearful of humans, so they no longer loiter in yards, and many of the herds choose to move out into the rural population. And how he described it was, it creates a level playing field between the rural landscape and the urban landscape. So it just takes small changes. It's not a totalitarian kind of implementation. It's small. Thank you.
I would agree with that. I used to live in Pisgah years and years ago, and it was like the deer down there carried a calendar. They knew when hunting season opened. You'd see them daily, and then hunting season opens and you didn't see them at all. So, we will be, proceeding with some discussion on this and possibly be able to implement something that will allow our homeowners some relief from the, burgeoning deer population. Is anyone else in the room that would like to address council tonight? Okay, we'll move on to item 4, which is reconvening of the legislative hearing, originally opened on June 8th, 2023. Item 4A is case RZ 23-05, and that's consideration of rezoning property located at the intersection of Old Cox Road and Old Humble Mill Roads on the west side of Old Cox Road, for the purpose of residential development. And what I would say at this point in time is we had a pretty lengthy hearing last month. I'm not gonna sit here and say you cannot speak, but if you have spoken to council last month during the public hearing, I would ask that you free up time for those of you in the room that have not addressed council on this matter, and be respectful of the time that you take, and try not to repeat the same things that we've heard before. So, Mr. Nuttall, go right ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. I will say there is an associated annexation request that is with this application in order to provide information and allow the public to offer input. We have scheduled this such that we present information on the zoning that would be enacted should the council, under a separate vote, which is the next agenda item, choose to bring the property into the city limits. So we will talk about this project, and in particular, changes that have been made to the plan since you last reviewed this item. But prior to making a decision pertaining to the zoning, you need to decide the question of annexation beforehand. So just real quickly, I'm going to give an overview of the application. This is filed by Bill Turner, who is not the property owner, but is the applicant on this request. The property owners have signed on to this application as required by the law. It is for a planned unit development to consist of single-family detached, single-family attached, and initially there was a commercial element proposed with that application. As I said last month, that particular feature has been withdrawn from this application. The area where that had originally been proposed is still a part of this annexation, and if you choose, would come into the city limits and be given whatever district the council decides. But there is not a commercial element with this current application. Again, there are 3 separate Randolph County parcel IDs. There's over 233 acres involved. Largely, the property is undeveloped. There is a former residential structure on the property. I want to spend my time real quickly just letting you know the changes that have occurred to the plan. The revised plans are at your places. There are several changes that we think are meaningful with this proposal. The first relates to parking for the development. There was significant discussion and questions asked about the adequacy of parking for the project. In response, the application and the site plan has been amended to add 34 off-street parking spaces, 34 new off-street parking spaces to the project. Those are dispersed throughout the project. The second change relates to the number of units now proposed. That has been reduced from 413 to 399. There are 398 new lots proposed. The 399th would contain the existing structure if it can be preserved and repurposed. There is a new condition pertaining to a 6-foot fence that is now provided along the perimeter of the property boundary closest to Old Humble Mill Road, where the floodplain of Richlands Creek does not provide an element of natural buffering. So there is now a good deal of 6-foot fencing that is proposed. And lastly, we've received some additional details from the applicant related particularly to the townhomes within Phase 1. What that means is that in addition to the extra off-street parking that the plans now show, those additional 34 spaces, each unit will also have the commitment of a dedicated driveway and a garage, just as other homes in the development. So those are the primary revisions that we think are most meaningful to this plan. There's been some other technical changes to some open space and some common area elements, but these are what we believe are primarily of interest for you and the public.
Trevor,
Yes, ma'am.
one question on the reduction of homes. Was that across the board, a particular type of what, I mean?
Yes, ma'am. I will jump ahead. On this slide here, it depicts where the majority of the units were reduced, and that is within Phase 2 of the project. So within Phase 2, we've seen the majority of the reduction, maybe all but one or two of the reduction of lots have occurred in Phase 2 of the project. Phase 2, as you can see on this plan, is primarily would be accessed from Old Humble Mill Road. Phase 2 is also the location shown in yellow on this plan and visible on your site plans where the 6-foot fence would be provided along the property boundary. As it relates to the additional parking, I'm using Phase 1 just as an example to show what these additional parking spaces look like, but if you review the entirety of the plan, you'll see that these are dispersed throughout the development. I've circled a couple of them on the screen here that give you an idea of some additional parking that has now been provided. Typically, we see this as beneficial to visitors of the community, not necessarily parking for residents, but parking for visitors. And so you will now have 34 additional spaces dispersed throughout the project. The additional elevation that we received from the applicant does show an additional design for the townhome. And I want to be quick to point out that it does not mean that these units, the color, the roof pitch is precisely what will be constructed there. What this is intended to show is that each unit will have a dedicated driveway and a garage to provide the necessary parking to support the project. Based on those plan revisions, we felt it was necessary and helpful to add 3 additional conditions to reinforce what the plans and the materials that have been presented to us attempt to do. And so the 3 new conditions contained in the report are identified as C, C, D, D, and EE. If you read those, they, in essence, memorialize what I've just discussed that is shown on the plan. So we are up to conditions EE now for the project. I'll remind the council that both the planning board and the staff do present this to you with a favorable recommendation. You know that you will, when you get to the zoning question, you'll have to deal with both the consistency of the application as well as the zoning district request. But at this time, I'll remind the council that we must deal with the annexation prior. But Mayor, this would be an appropriate time for me to take any questions or to let anyone else speak.
I was looking through it today, and I had a question about the RVs. It looked like there would be no RVs, and then it's just something about homeowners can have RVs. What is the situation with that?
Well, our interpretation of the plan is that in many areas throughout the proposed project, the lots are not conducive to RV storage on the lots. And in fact, there is no area designated for RV storage for those vehicles. However, there are a number of larger acreage lots, and those, in our opinion, could support an accessory building or a garage that could house a boat or some other recreational vehicle. So we did not think it was appropriate to preclude recreational vehicles throughout the development. The conditions attempt to ensure that those only occur on lots that are sized to be able to handle that.
Any other questions from Mr. Nuttall? Not the appropriate time yet. Hold on, please.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Patillo, if you want to come up to the microphone, and I will ask, there's not a sign-up sheet, is there?
Yes, sir, there is a.
Okay, I can't see it from here. Please, if you speak tonight on any matter, please print your name on the sign-up sheet, and the reason for that is so that when we transcribe the audio tape, we can get your name correct, the spelling correctly, because it's not always clear on the audio tape. Go right ahead, ma'am.
I understand from one of the earlier screens that the commercial application has been withdrawn, but does the zoning law that you're trying to pass still allow that commercial if the property owner chooses to do it in the future?
No.
It would have to
Nuttall,
be
you wanna
rezoned
address
at a
that, please?
different time?
Yes, ma'am. Any approval this evening would not include a commercial element. Any future commercial uses proposed would have to come back to the city council and be reviewed by the planning board for a recommendation under a separate application.
Thank you, that answered it.
It would require a public hearing and public notification, just like this.
Okay.
Okay, well, we are not reinstituting a new public hearing. If there's anyone in the audience that is desperately inclined to address the council on this, and we have not heard you before, I will entertain a few comments from the audience briefly. Anybody? Okay. Council?
Mayor, I think the concerns that have been expressed relative to the density of this project, as well as the free flow of persons across the property addressed by the fence condition, as well as the parking conditions that we've been trying to address in all of our considerations, I would make a motion that we approve the request, with all the conditions as proposed, based on the consistency statement provided by staff and find them reasonable.
Mr. Bell, before we hear that particular motion, it would be appropriate to reopen the annexation public hearing to decide that question.
All right, Mayor, would you reconvene the public hearing on the question of the annexation?
Yes, I will reopen the public hearing on the question of the annexation request. The same general rules will apply. We heard most of you speak last month on the annexation request. If there's anyone in the audience that did not have the opportunity to speak last month or has something new for the benefit of the council, we will hear your comment at this time. Okay. Having no comment at this time, I will go back to the council for deliberation.
Mayor, I think would be appropriate now to consider an adoption of the ordinance to extend the corporate limits. Upon that action, you can go back and revisit the zoning request since we don't have ETJ out there.
Okay, do I have a motion to, regarding the annexation request?
And I'll
We have the ordinance by reference.
comment, there is an annexation ordinance.
We have that in front of us by reference.
I see it, Mayor. Mayor, I move we adopt the ordinance extending corporate city limits by annexing territory in the vicinity of the Old Cox Road and Old Hummel Mill Road intersections by reference.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Do I have a second? Mr. Moffett? I have a second by Mr. Moffett. In discussion. All in favor of approving this resolution for annexation, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The property is hereby approved for annexation. The second question, do I have a motion?
Do I have to restate that, Jeff?
You can just affirm that that's still the motion.
I would affirm my previous motion with respect to consistency statement and the conditional rezoning request with all the appropriate conditions at this time.
Do we have a second? Second, Mr. Moffett. Discussion. I would take this opportunity myself, and I'm not a voting member of this body, except in case of a tie. I would take this opportunity to say to the developer that I appreciate your willingness to work with the neighbors and hear their comments. It is a desire of the council, as you have determined over the last couple of months, that we not have a lot of on-street parking. That is important to us in Asheboro. We may at some point, with the growth that's coming, get to the point where on-street parking is a necessity, and that future councils may feel differently. But right now, it's important to us that we not have a lot of on-street parking. I say thank you for your consideration on that in phase one here. Are there any other comments? We have a motion and a second to approve this rezoning. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The process of rezoning this property will take place. All right.
It was in his motion, your combined motion.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate you reminding me. All right. Now, I realize that most of you are here for this one question. If you would like to leave, I'll take about a minute to let you exit the room quietly if you can do so. If you need to stand out and talk, please go down the steps. Don't do it right there at the doorway. I will say for the rest of the audience that this is the first of what we expect to be many large changes to our area. We know of another development coming in right on the heels of this one. The request has not been made, but we're expecting another request very similar in size to this, so be prepared. Ross, you want to come in? How about just grabbing the door and close the door for us, please? And grab a seat. Okay.
Here they come the rest of the group. Mayor, number 5 is.
Yeah, we're on that 4B. I don't believe you're up yet, Ross.
We did 4B, Mayor, now.
Do what? I'm sorry.
We did 4B, it's now 5, it's a continuation request.
Okay, we're on 5.
Yes, sir.
It's continuation.
Okay, we'll reopen the legislative hearing on case RZ 23-07 to consider rezoning property located at 379-1 and 379-2 South Cox Street. And I notice here that the applicant has requested an additional continuance
Yes, sir, Mayor.
until August 10th.
Yes, sir. This is the second continuance request that's been asked for by the applicant. We've asked their counsel just to be present, and if you will allow, just to say a few words in terms of that, where that is.
As a result of the informational meeting, which was very good, we had city staff present, and they are evaluating comments on that, and that's why we're in the process of reevaluating.
Well, I gotta tell you, Bob, we wanna get this right.
That's exactly what I
So,
thought.
if you need another continuance, we'll put this off.
There was a death of a family member, the gentleman we were working with, and so the meeting last week had to be postponed. So we're gonna try to nail this thing down, and I'll be in touch with.
All right, I need a motion to grant the continuance.
Mayor, I move we grant the request to continue to August 10 on behalf of the applicant.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bell. I have a motion to grant the continuance. May I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Burks. Discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion to continue is approved. Okay. Since I've already called Ross Holt to the stand, Trevor, do you want to introduce him or do?
Mr. Holt needs no introduction.
Mr. Holt, have at it, sir.
All right.
We welcome you.
Thank you.
Send the infamous.
Notorious. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. On behalf of the Randolph County Historic Landmark Preservation Commission, I'm delighted to be back tonight to, I hope, complete the local historic landmark designation of the Acme McCrary Complex. You'll recall that there are 3 components to the site. The McCrary Mill No. 2 Parks Hosiery Mill building, now the Church Street Loft Apartments, the Acme McCrary Recreation Center, now the Asheboro Recreation Center, and the main Acme McCrary Hosiery Mill on North Street. The Landmark Commission has recommended all 3 for designation, and you have acted on the Church Street Lofts building and the Rec Center, so that all remains is the main factory on North Street, which was initially constructed in 1909 and expanded over the next several decades. You have the very impressive nomination report in your packets, so I won't go into detail about the factory, except to say that it more than meets the criteria for designation as a local historic landmark in terms of its architecture, its value as a critical part of the city's cultural, historic, and social heritage, its identification with people who contributed to the economic and social development of Asheboro, namely the McCrarys and the Reddings, and its representation of a distinctive theme, that of early 20th century manufacturing and its evolution over more than a half century, as expressed through its distinctive buildings. The ordinance in your packet designates the exterior of the North Street Factory as a local historic landmark. There are architectural elements of the interior that are important to note, but our recommendations normally deal only with exteriors. So with that, I'll turn the Landmark Commission's recommendation for designation of the Acme McCrary Hosiery Mill at 159 North Street over to you for your consideration and answer any questions you have.
Are there any questions for Mr. Holt? Well, it's culmination of it's the first phase of the culmination of a long project of the actual preservation and long-term plan to ensure that that building is around for many years to come in a productive manner. Right now, it's sitting there empty, and we're certainly having our issues with people unauthorized access and deterioration of the building due to rain and leaks, and we've got a lot of it stabilized. So are there any questions, Mr. Holt? You just need a motion.
If you wouldn't mind, Mr. Mayor, just inquiring, since it is a legislative hearing.
It is a public hearing, I'm sorry. Is there anyone in the room that would like to address the council on this item? Inclusion of the Acme McCrary mill property, Hosier Mill property on the historic landmark designation for Randolph County. Hearing none, I'll ask council for their thoughts.
Mayor, I move we adopt the ordinance designating the exterior of the building as a local historic landmark by reference.
Have a motion by Mr. Bell to approve by reference. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Ms. Heath. Discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Holt. Council, you have in front of you a rather lengthy list of consent agenda items. Is there any item on the consent agenda that anyone would like to remove for individual discussion and consideration? Okay, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as it is presented in front of.
Mayor, I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
I have a motion by Mr. Burks. Thank you, sir. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Swears. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion is approved. Consent agenda is approved. Mr. Leonard, item 8, City Engineer Michael Leonard, you have request for the city to take over maintenance of the streets at Sherwood Oaks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Staff has received a request from the residents of Sherwood Oaks Townhomes, requesting the city investigate taking over the maintenance of Sherwood Oaks Drive, which is 1,185 feet, approximately 1,185 feet, Ashmont Court, approximately 450 feet, and Hickory Creek Trail, approximately 380 feet. If the council directs staff to proceed, we anticipate this will be done in similar fashion to that of Parkway South Townhomes, which will include the zoning hearing to establish building setbacks from the public right-of-way.
Questions of Mr. Leonard?
Will these dead-end terminus streets, Michael, have give problems with regard to snow removal and all that kind of thing?
It's possible. That's something where we're gonna have to just discuss with staff, and see what their concerns are. I know they've got access from, Mac Road as well through a gate, so it's possible.
We
to
have
get in there.
operation of the gate.
Okay.
That is an emergency exit entrance that we had the developer put in when this was built, simply to ensure that if there were a fire or something that blocked the primary entrance, that we would be able to get emergency vehicles into that neighborhood, because it's a considerable neighborhood. And so, I will say, just as a point of reference, those of you that attend regularly, in this room, our council meetings, know that we talk at great length and try our best to discourage private streets. And this is exactly why. This probably never should have been built as a private street, but it was, and now they're asking us to take it over because there's no money to resurface the streets. So, for future reference, be careful what you ask for.
We just, the staff mayor just needs, just your consent, your guidance to start the process, and then we'll come back to you as we gather more information.
All
The
Jeff,
city-
you want a motion for that, or just consensus?
It would be sufficient just to get consensus, and any formal action will come
Is
back
there
to you.
anyone on council that has any particular heartburn over this request?
The short answer is no, I support it. I would, I'm mulling it over in my own mind, so there's no agenda in my commentary, as to whether or not, once this becomes our property, if would evaluate the viability, feasibility of, turning the emergency exit on into a street to have proper pass-through there. I'd ask staff to give us a recommendation on that. First blush, I can,
There might be
I know-
some value to that.
I know the reasons when Wagner and them came up and we established that, but given this turn of development, I think it could prove worthy to not have to waste time opening a gate.
Let me ask, now, there's no garbage pickup, right? They don't, still be no garbage.
They have dumpsters.
They have dumpster service.
So, but now, what about like trash stuff that,
We'll work with the homeowners association on that the president has asked us to begin the process. That's where we are tonight, so. We'll work with the homeowner on that association.
They'll most likely keep the dumpsters. They don't want that one-armed bandit coming in.
There are details that remain to be worked out as we move through this process. But the consensus, is there consensus that we can pursue this?
We need to take a look at it.
Yeah,
All right. Staff, you have your marching orders.
okay, thank you, Mayor.
Item 9A, Mr. Nuttall, legislative hearing, case RZ 23-08, which is a request to rezone property at 207 East Pritchard Street.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a general legislative rezoning request, so there are no specific plans or conditions proposed with this application. It is filed by H.R. Gallimore on behalf of the estate of Peggy Britt. It's an existing structure at 207 East Pritchard Street. This is a request to take the property from a general district B2 commercial to a general district office and apartment designation. There's one Randolph County PIN, just under 1 acre in size. Most recently, this was a business services, specifically an insurance office. On the screen, you can see the subject parcel outlined in blue. It is on the north side of East Pritchard Street, right at the boundary between general commercial zoning and residential zoning that begins immediately eastward. These properties identified with a letter, letter A, of course, is the subject parcel. Any other property identified with the letter is considered an adjoining property owner and would have received notice from the applicant and the city on this request. I will report that the case has been properly advertised and the property posted consistent with the notice requirements of the general statutes. Again, commercial is in red. You have, I believe that's office and institutional, or even, it's an industrial designation to the south in that purple, and then any areas in yellow or gold are moderate density residential zoning. So across the street from industrial and right up against residential. Here's the topographic utility map. Again, this is a mostly developed property. There are built improvements on the site, including a parking lot, relatively flat, is served by the full array of city services. Here's a picture of the property. We've got an oblique photo giving you a different angle. This is the property and the structure as seen from East Pritchard Street. This is looking westward towards North Fayetteville Street, and then eastward away from North Fayetteville Street. This is now looking south down Greensboro Street and the industrial zoning to the south. Real quickly, on this application, we are looking at property in the city limits. East Pritchard is maintained by the city. It does carry a decent amount of volume of traffic. It is therefore a collector level street. B2, the current district, is a retail-oriented district. The requested office and apartment district is a moderate-intensity office as well as a high-density residential designation. Under the code, land designated OA6 shall be located to with access to a minor or higher classification street with access to local residential streets discouraged. This is kind of in between. It's not quite a thoroughfare, but it is not a local residential street, as you know. So the district requested does allow single, two-family, as well as multifamily dwellings, and depending on the size of the property, there could be a cap on the amount of residential uses that may be developed on the property. It also allows institutional uses such as places of worship, and in commercial, some lighter commercial, non-retail oriented uses, such as medical, professional offices, hair salons. Eating establishments or restaurants, motor vehicle repair, other retail uses are not permitted in the OA6 district. Again, approval this evening would allow any and all uses that are permitted under the code to be applied for at the staff level for permitting. Again, last use of the property was for an insurance office. Based on the records that we can find, it's actually designated in the tax records as a single-family residence. So the structure was built roughly 100 years ago. We do point out in our report that if there is an intent to have mixed occupancy throughout the structure, or an office use perhaps on the first floor and a residential use on the second floor, it's important to remind folks that compliance with state building code will still be required, must be demonstrated. As we look to the land development plan for guidance, the current map reflects the current designation by the zoning map. So it's it's right on the edge of the residential area. So it is actually mapped as neighborhood residential, even though the zoning is commercial, but that's because of the large area of residential that it butts up against. Primary growth area within the city limits. Several goals and policies we believe support this application. We didn't feel like there were many that tended to be negative. The bottom line on this application in our eyes is it provides what we typically seek to provide between residential and commercial uses, and that's a transitional zone such as the OA6. So for those reasons, we believe this is a reasonable request, and both the staff and the planning board recommend approval of the application. Be happy to answer any questions.
Anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Mayor.
I think I neglected to open the hearing. This is a public hearing. Is anyone in the room that would like to address council on this request?
Mr. Mayor, council members, I'm H.R. Gallimore. I'm here to represent the
owner, Mr. Britt. He owns the laundromat next door. I think Trevor pretty much summed it up. This is a home that was built many years ago. It looks like a home, smells like a home. The B2 was probably a little aggressive zoning when that was done. OA6 will give you the opportunity to do another office user, if so be it, but also give you an opportunity to have residential there if need be. It's probably a better transition into that residential neighborhood than the B2 would be. So, simply put, it's down zone. Any questions?
Questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, moving to deliberation, council?
Mayor, based on the consistency statement provided by staff and favorable recommendation by staff and the planning board, I move we approve the rezoning request.
Have a motion by Mr. Bell. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Burks. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item 9A was approved. Item 9B, legislative hearing on case RZ 23-09, a request to rezone property at 3114 Zoo Parkway from R40 low density to R10 medium density. And I will open the hearing.
Thank you, Mayor. Like the previous application, this is a general district legislative request, so there are no specific plans or uses proposed with this application. It is only a application to take it from a low-density or R40 residential district to the city's medium-density R10 residential district. This is filed by the applicant, Rick Spencer. There is one county parcel involved in this request, just over 2 acres in size. Presently, the property is undeveloped. If you remember, formerly there had been a single-family dwelling on the property. As we look at the overview map on the screen, the subject parcel is outlined in blue. You can see it's wedged in between a high-density residential district for Parkway South in the orange to the south, and then in industrially, conditionally zoned industrial district, also owned by the applicant to the north. Across Zoo Parkway is, of course, Crossroads. That's zoned OA6. You can see some of the property comprised in the Zoo City Sportsplex up to the north and east. Of course, the city's property is zoned both commercial and residential. Any areas that don't have a color shading or label are outside of the city limits and also outside of our extraterritorial zoning jurisdiction. So to the west, that is actually under the county zoning authority. The map here shows the subject parcel identified by A. Any adjoining property possesses a letter on this map, and those property owners would have received a notice from both the city and the applicant. I can report that this case has been properly advertised in the newspaper, the letter sent, and the property posted as required by law. This is a topographic map and utilities map. You can see the city does have utilities in the vicinity. That green and black line is a sewer line, but it is a pressurized line, so that is pumped back to the city's gravity collection system. So there are utilities in the vicinity. It's not one that allows just a direct connection to that line due to it being a force main. But the property does have access to utilities. And in fact, my understanding is Mr. Spencer is pursuing annexation of the property into the city limits. That would be required in order to connect to both water and sewer. This is an aerial map. You nicely see the field 1 at the Sportsplex up to the northeast of the subject parcel, and the undeveloped property of Crossroads, Cross Zoo Parkway, and then the townhomes to the south. Again, a oblique map giving you an idea. Obviously, this has a little bit more age to it. Don't see the fields completed in that one. This is a view of the subject property as seen from Zoo Parkway and Old Cox Road. Now, we're at a different vantage point, looking more northward along Zoo Parkway, and then direct due north along Zoo Parkway there. Back south, you can see the sign for Parkway South to the right there. Quickly considering analysis of this, as I said, the property is currently outside the city limits, but it is within the city's extraterritorial zoning jurisdiction, so we already possess the authority to consider the zoning change. Zoo Parkway is maintained by NCDOT. I'll note that the existing R40 district does allow both single-family and two-family development. Single-family requires a minimum 40,000 square foot per lot and per unit. A duplex or a two-family dwelling is permitted under the current district, but it does require 80,000 square feet of lot area. The requested district, again, is a moderate intensity residential district intended to permit single and two-family homes that are served by city water and sewer systems, plus the other supportive services. R40, in essence, is a much more rural designation, kind of reserved for the fringes of the city's land use authority. As you look at the land development plan for guidance on this one, due to everything going on around this intersection, the development of the sportsplex, this has been mapped as a kind of a mixed-use area that could develop over time. So it's known as a village activity center. There could be some applications in the future that propose more mixture of uses. Of course, this is just to put it into a medium-density residential district. The planning board does forward this to council with a favorable recommendation. The board actually heard this over two separate meetings. There was some questions that they had regarding future access and driveways that we couldn't really answer at this time because it's not a conditioned request, but we did speak with NCDOT about what's likely to occur should there be a development proposal seeking subdivision, single or two-family homes. And what we heard and what we reported back to the DOT is it's likely that the state will seek a shared access, particularly if it's a duplex project that's proposed. We've shared that with Mr. Spencer. And of course, that's beyond the purview of the council at this time. But the point of that is to let you know that there are mechanisms in place to ensure that safety will be preserved with any type of development of the property. Again, not in the primary limits, so it is a secondary growth. What we envisioned we would be growing into when the land development was first adopted 20 plus years ago. Of course, we're there now. Several goals and policies we believe are supportive of the request. It doesn't quite fit what the plan envisioned at this time for the property, but it is more consistent with what is happening in the area. So for those reasons, we do believe this is a reasonable application. As I said, the planning board did forward a favorable recommendation on a vote of 6-1. This application also has staff support, and we do recommend approval.
Questions?
Trevor, relative, I know it's not before us in a real sense, but is that the intersection where the roundabout is proposed?
That, there has been conversation, yes, sir, about the roundabout.
Just logistically about where we are.
Yes, sir.
How many two-family houses or dwellings could he put on that property there?
Well, what you ultimately can develop is a factor of how much road frontage you have, and therefore how many lots you can create and the acreage of the property. I think it's most likely that there will be 2 lots ultimately developed. There's I think some potential maybe for a third lot, but as you can see from the property configuration, it doesn't really lend itself to kind of an equal distribution of property. So our belief is you'll probably see 2 lots developed on the property, which could support a total of 4 dwelling units, 1 duplex per lot.
Other questions? The questions have been answered, the questions that the planning board had, their concern, and, they did give us a favorable recommendation. Council, what are your thoughts?
Anybody else want to speak, Mayor? Does anybody else want to speak?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak regarding this request?
Be glad to answer any questions.
I don't believe it's necessary.
Just wanted to give you an opportunity.
Somebody gotta keep me honest up here.
Chris may want to speak.
Mayor, based on the consistency statement by staff and a favorable recommendation by the planning board, I move we approve the request.
I have a motion by Mr. Bell to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Heath is the second. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. We're down to 9C, is that right?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'll open a legislative hearing on case RZ 23-10, which is a request to rezone property located at 615 and 617 South Church, around the corner on West Kivett and Hammer. Have at it, Mr. Nuttall.
Thank you, Mayor. This, unlike the previous two applications, is a conditioned request, so there is a site plan at your places. It's also included in the packet. There's also a page with building elevations to show you the proposed design. This property and the project is going to look very familiar to you. The council did approve a very similar project probably about a year ago. The purpose of this coming back to you is because the applicant, Winfield Ford, who now owns the property, has determined that a layout significantly different than what had previously been proposed is warranted due to environmental and site constraints. So if you remember, the prior application had a 4-story building with 60 units pretty close to Church Street. The purpose of pulling it to Church Street from talking to the applicant was to maximize the separation from the railroad, but in conversations that I'm sure Mr. Ray will explain with some of the partners on the project, they've determined that they can still make the project worth and avoid having to impact the stream and the wetlands on the property. So this is really only back to you to show you a different proposal. It's a somewhat smaller project. It's down to 48 units. I'll quickly go through it here, but this is known as a whole block redevelopment for a multifamily development for the elderly. So all of that still applies. It is still senior housing that's proposed here on 2.5 acres. We do have several existing residential units. There's a total of 8 units that will be affected by this project. So there will be a loss of eight units, but the city will gain 48 units. I won't spend a lot of time showing these maps. You're familiar with the location, bounded by Hammer, Lanier, Church, and Kivett. Currently, it's already in that OA6 condition district. You've already approved the project. There is the stream that they are seeking to avoid on that stream, so on that screen, so they are pushing the building eastward now. The other challenges with this property is that the city has a 8-inch sewer main that bisects the property. That provides some challenges in terms of how you can develop the site. And in fact, the proposed building location will require the developer to relocate in some manner a portion of that sewer main to get it out from under where they propose to construct the building. But all that has been reviewed by city staff. There is a way to do that and for us to preserve the sewer collection system. This is an aerial map. You can see the existing homes that are on the property. You see the location of the stream. Again, this 4-story structure will be pushed now closer to the Hammer portion of the property. oblique map. You see surrounding land uses, including high-density residential to the south and some commercial and quasi-industrial to the east. Plan is very similar in terms of improvements that will be made. There is a requirement in the whole block redevelopment for street improvements, so there will be curb and gutter and sidewalk installed, just like there had been previously proposed. This is just changing the building location, shrinking the project slightly. There are three, what we believe are minor deviations that are requested from the code with this application. I'll cover those in a few moments. This is the elevation. It's going to look very similar to what you saw last time. It's just not as long. We'll quickly go through these photos. Won't spend a lot of time here. I've covered the majority of that. The three deviations that are requested with this application, the first relates to what typically are required for visitor parking for a project such as this. And typically under the city code, 10%, the number of units for this type of project must be provided in the form of visitor parking. So with 48 units proposed, 10% of that means typically we would be looking for 5 overflow or visitor parking. Due to just the site layout and the constraints, we've talked with them about ways to potentially do that. There's really no good way to provide those 5 additional spaces. They also have experience in this business that they believe, and I know Davis will talk to this, those spaces are not expected to be needed. They are providing what's necessary for the units. They don't believe that those 5 overflow spaces are critical. We don't believe they're critical either. The building is a little taller than what we typically allow in the district. We typically have a cap of 45 feet. This is about 2.5 feet above that. The third is to permit indoor recreational area to serve as a recreational area for the project. Under the city code, a project of this size, all of your recreational area that's required generally is to be located outdoors. So the city's policies are looking for, a park area, walking trails, picnic areas. In this case, the applicant is providing a good amount of outdoor recreation area and also indoor recreational area. And the combination of both indoor and outdoor recreation does exceed what we typically require. We just don't, at the staff level, have a provision to consider what's the common elements or indoor recreational areas that are being provided with the project. So therefore, it is considered a deviation before you. The definition of the requested district is on the screen in number 7. I'll remind the council that this particular provision in the ordinance is envisioned to help revitalize neighborhoods, remove blighted and unsafe structure, encourage reinvestment in areas of the city that warrant it, stabilize property values, and so there's a very specific code standard that this application is meeting to build the project. Center City activity area, it's obviously there's a mixture of uses occurring in this area. This will continue that trend. Overall, most of the goals and policies we believe do support the application. We do think there's a series of conditions that are important to ensure that this continues to operate in compliance with the city plans and codes. So those there's a 7 or 6 conditions that we've proposed to ensure continuing compliance. We've shared those with the applicant. I believe those are all acceptable to the applicant. Overall, our consistency statement is on the screen. It's been provided in the report. This is a different project. Most of the beneficial, if not all the beneficial components of the previous application still stand in our view. We do recommend approval of this request. Thank you, Mayor.
Questions?
Trevor, I see in the consistency statement, there's reference to this additional tree preservation, but I'm not really seeing that on the site plan. It just seems like there's a lot of area, there's a lot of trees on that property. I certainly understand with the dwellings needing to be removed. I mean, I
Yeah.
get it. But I guess I was just expecting that maybe there might be some tree cover on the left side of the creek.
Yeah, I think aside from where they will remove those structures, that's where we believe the bulk of the preservation will occur. There was some discussion about, do we seek to get those overflow parking spaces provided on that side of the project? We felt it was better to preserve the vegetation, the green space on that side of the creek rather than 5 parking spaces, so we did support that deviation. I think in essence, that's where it's coming from. We're only gonna be, unlike the prior plan, we're only gonna be on one side of that creek now, as opposed to basically.
All the way from, the library, Center City Garden, Bicentennial Park,
Sure.
I mean, we've just got a real opportunity, so
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask.
Can you back the pictures up to the most attractive picture of the residents?
I'll slowly go through them so you can
Keep going.
see them.
You'll get there. Keep going. Yeah, it was that one. No, not the white, that one.
So
As a mayor, I get more complaints about that block. This is a win-win for the city of Asheboro.
And for people who need housing.
Well, yeah.
Be
senior-
mindful of how densely you want that green space left.
Relative to the parking, it is diagonally across from the Memorial Park,
Yeah,
right, with all the.
Correct,
Yeah.
right.
so,
Where are the chickens going? That's what I'm worried about.
and
Bicentennial.
the new purchaser took possession of the property or actually closed on the deal. How long ago? Month?
I would say it's a month. Mr. Ray can answer that
About a
question.
month ago, and they can't get the people to move out.
It is a process. I will say we have had some concerns raised from, not surprisingly, from residents that we'll have to move for this project. The applicant has been great about fielding those calls and working with those folks to try to find a satisfactory resolution. So we are sensitive to the fact that this is affecting eight households. We do appreciate the
There's
applicant.
not a lot to choose from for them to find other places, but they were offered a cash stipend to encourage them to move, and they cannot, either they can't find the place, they won't find the place, but whatever it is, it's holding up the project.
But I'll turn it over to Mr. Ray.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Thank you for taking the time to hear this evening. I will address the conditions more specifically than anything else. Trevor covered it pretty good. With respect to the parking spaces, just a little bit of data that I basically researched on the 2 developments that we currently have in Asheboro, Sherwood Place Apartments off of Mack Road, and then Sunset Place Apartments, obviously off of Sunset and Cherry. Both of those yield a little, Sherwood yields about 50% of their parking spaces as empty during peak times. That is also a senior community, so roughly 45 to 50 spaces. We constantly have at least 25 spaces open. Sunset's a little bit different because it's a family community. A lot of folks that travel to and from work. That one yields about 15 to 20 spaces, but still yet it's always has adequate parking. So I did want to address that. With respect to the height of the building, one of the reasons we requested that deviation in condition was due to the fact, as you can see on the site plan, we literally have no room to move. We're as tight as this site will get, and that kind of is coinciding with the parking as well. Finally, we complied with the zoning and the process as well as we could with respect to outdoor space and rec space. You brought up a point in reference to the trees and existing vegetation. From our perspective, it's a win-win for us to leave as much of the existing vegetation as possible. That being said, there is a lot of activity that will take place in the coming months to remove all of those structures, so I can't guarantee an exact number of what will remain. As far as the chickens, I have no idea where they'll be.
Bicentennial Park.
The mayor brought up a good point with respect to the folks who are currently occupying those units. we did give them, we're not required to give them a set number of days to move out once we obtain the property, but we did give them 45 days as well as a $1,000 stipend apiece to help relocate them. And we've been in communications, I would say, with every single one of them. The time is ticking. They have 2 days left to vacate the premises, and we hope that everything goes smoothly, but if it doesn't, then we'll obviously take the next step to make sure that those properties are vacated. Other than that, I just wanted to make myself available for any questions that any of you may have. We appreciate this, and we're most excited to get started on another community here. There is a great need, and we look forward to serving that.
I will say that your communities and the projects that you have in Asheboro are attractive and well-maintained. And
Thank you.
We're thankful to have you interested in Asheboro again.
Likewise. We
Are
appreciate
the,
you guys.
Proposed 6 conditions amenable to you?
Yes, sir.
Any questions? Other questions?
Maybe the chickens could be service animals.
Don't tell my wife, she'll take them home.
Thank you.
She's never seen a chicken coop she didn't like. All right. Anyone else in the audience that would like to address this request? Hearing none, I will move to deliberation and ask the council for their thoughts.
Mayor, based on a consistency statement provided by staff and subject to the conditions proposed amenable to the applicant, I move that we approve the rezoning request.
Have a motion by Mr. Bell. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Swears. Discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Good luck, sir.
Thank you.
We're excited about your next project in Asheboro, and it can't happen quick enough for us.
We agree.
All right, Mr. Nuttall, I think we're on 9D,
Yes,
which
sir.
is a update qualification-based selection process for the procurement of architectural services needed for the David and Pauline Gerald Center City Garden. And let me add that Ms. Gerald passed away last week, a couple weeks ago, and quite a loss for our community, and it just breaks my heart that while she was at the groundbreaking, she didn't live long enough to see the culmination of their generosity.
Absolutely.
So whatever we do down there, we gotta do well and make her proud.
For sure. And this is only an update that we wanted to let the public, let the council know that we are moving forward with all speed possible. As it relates to the visitor center that we all know is necessary for the project, with the adoption of the master plan last month by the city council, which recommended bringing an architect in to help us navigate the best way to provide, meet that need of a visitor center. Mr. Ogburn has elected to exempt the selection of that architect, which is his purview based on the scope and the expected cost of that project. The nice thing about doing so is that instead of going through a long process to make a selection, we can get right to work with an architect and begin plans for how that visitor center will be provided. So the first step will be taking a harder look at that existing structure and determining is it cost, is it beneficial, is it meet the need that the city and the public has to repurpose that structure. If it is, the architect will help with those plans. If not, we will come up with a plan that I think respects the residential character of the neighborhood, the existing architecture, if for some reason we can't do that. But we did want to let you know that and the public know that we are moving forward. We will be adding an architect to the team here in the next few weeks, and we also expect the civil construction plans for the garden to come in at any day now. So this project is a priority, and it will move forward.
And Mayor, I follow on with that. I did approve the qualification procurement under the Minnie Brooks Act, and it's HH Architecture out of Raleigh. Who was our landscape architect, Jen Wagner, recommended, and you may recognize that term. That's the group doing the accent, or the Family Food and Farm Center.
They've been great. They've already, Kristen Hess has already been on site, has looked at already looked at the structure, and we anticipate adding her to the team here very soon. So that's just an update. No actions required. We'll keep you apprised.
Okay, you have an update on proposed Trade Street renovations?
Yeah, we felt it was time to just give the council and the public an update on this project. You know that the Wooten Company is the city's consulting engineering firm. They continue to work on Trade Street renovation plans. We wanted to, at this time, kind of give the council an opportunity to review the traffic information that is in your packets, has been provided to you, that pertain to that project. Ramey Kemp and Associates performed the traffic analysis in working with Wooten and in conversations with us to look at build-out scenarios along North Street, along Trade Street, and how what we think may happen in terms of future development will affect the street network there. As part of that evaluation, we did ask for an opinion on the impacts to the overall downtown street network if North Street were to be one-wayed. There's been conversation over the years about the potential to pick up some additional on-street parking perhaps if we were to one-way North Street. As a part of this study, we asked for an opinion in terms of what the impacts would be to the street network and to vehicular congestion downtown. There's also been some thinking that closing a portion of North Street between Trade Street and Sunset would be beneficial to the project, would promote pedestrian safety and movement. And so we asked them to look at what a closure of that segment would look like and would do, assuming a different build-out scenarios. The good news is that the engineers that we've worked with do believe that as it's currently exists in terms of two-way traffic on North Street all the way from Salisbury to Sunset, the directional flow of Trade Street, the consensus is that the network can handle the additional traffic that likely will come as the Acme property, for instance, is redeveloped. But the opinion of the engineers was that one-waying North Street, and especially cutting off or closing that segment of north between Trade and Sunset would be detrimental to downtown. They would require quite a bit of signal work and was likely to affect the level of service for those surrounding intersections. We wanted them to look at that because we have heard public comments in support of making that closure, and so one of the reasons to be before you tonight about this was to let everyone know that we don't believe that that's really a viable part of this project. Our recommendation and what we've asked Wooten to continue with is no change to the travel lanes on North Street, no closure, and no redirecting of traffic on Trade Street, to keep the streets as they are based on that detailed traffic study that was done, and to continue their work on dealing with the overhead utilities, including the power along North Street and Trade Street, and to make that more of a attractive and commercial center. So I'll be happy to answer any question. There's no, unless the council has a different feeling based on looking at that data, that is how we plan to proceed with this project.
I have a question. Hopefully you can refresh my memory. My recollection is poor as it may be, of the Trade Street rendering that we saw, a one-lane, kind of a meander
Yeah.
there that, and I can only presume the one-way would be from, Pebble Street to north. I can't imagine anybody wanting to go from north.
As it is now.
Yeah, correct.
DOT's not gonna let
Yeah.
You
dump
can't get
more
out
cars.
down there.
Yeah,
But-
correct.
But that it was gonna be a one lane, one way, and primarily it was just for service during off hours of the shops or whatnot.
Right.
Is that still,
That was the conceptual plans that were looked at, and that was what led us to move more into detailed engineering. It's possible that a similar concept kind of emerges, but we are more into, the engineering design at this time. So that was the impetus for this project. It may be that needs to be some changes to that plan to preserve, delivery and service access.
The meander part was to slow traffic
Sure.
down.
Yeah.
and obviously for primarily the electrical work on Trade, what I'm talking about has zero to do with getting that cleaned up and buried and implemented, and if that concept gets discussed further, I mean, it's essentially just some sidewalk and curb work to make it happen. It really doesn't
Yeah.
alter any of these fundamental engineering
Yeah.
type items, but that's the way I thought I remembered it. It looked nice.
That's
I
correct.
liked it.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yep. We're at the point to make sure that the engineering backs up and supports kind of the conceptual plans that were
What
introduced.
I saw
we
that being
found-
was the crowning achievement of downtown, to have something we could start from scratch to make the most aesthetically pleasing item we had.
Well, when we found the place, the location for the two pad transformers, it changed the whole construction project as far as the street itself. It really is just a little curb and gutter and paving, because we won't be putting in vaults or digging
Yeah.
doing a lot of digging. We'll still have power in the ground, and the services will come to the street, from each of the buildings, but it's not gonna be like it was planned with a vault and everything
Oh, that was,
underground.
but I do think the one-lane meander was very attractive.
And we will report that. In fact, John Gray, is here, and I'm sure he'll report that as well. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Roney. Item 10, Mr. Roney is Water Resources Director, and 10A is, you're gonna introduce Carl Scharf and John Gray from the Wooten Company to present a summary of the master plan for the city of Asheboro wastewater treatment.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and council members. Just a brief introduction. Remember, we are still waiting, or we now are waiting for the final issuance of our draft permit for the NPDES permit for the wastewater treatment plant. And with that and the concerns we have for meeting some of the potential parameters in that permit and just the overall age of the infrastructure, as well as every 20 years you need to look at a plan of your facility anyway. We consulted with the Wooten Company to work on a master plan for the facility just to look at it. So I'm going to have John Gray introduce Carl, who's the project manager that's been working on this study.
I was just itching to stand up a few minutes ago while Trevor was up here. But thank y'all very much for the opportunity to work with you on this wastewater treatment project. We really do enjoy working with the city. Your staff is phenomenal, very professional, and very willing to go above and beyond. That's on the Trade Street project as well as the wastewater project and other work that we do with the city. It's been very enjoyable. And just like the city of Asheboro, Wooten has many talented people, and Carl Scharf is one of our senior process engineers who deals with water and wastewater treatment processes. I get it from or to those plants. He helps make it good and clean. So I really was glad to have him involved in this project. So hopefully you'll find this information interesting. There's some big numbers, and it's a little intimidating. There's a lot of numbers, but sit back, don't relax too much. But we'll hear what Carl has to say. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and thanks for the opportunity to speak with you all here tonight. We'll get into some wastewater, how about that?
Got to start somewhere.
Got to start somewhere, right? So, as Michael was saying, we were hired to look at your existing wastewater treatment plant and look at a couple of different things about it. Normally, when you have a wastewater plant, there's certain parts of it that are aged out or getting older, and you may need to look at upgrading those. Then you also look at, as what Michael was explaining, was what's in your permit? What do you have to treat to meet? And so some concerns are coming up is that there may be some additional parameters to meet that the existing plant cannot treat to. So that's an important part of it. And then the last thing is how's community growing, and how do you have to take into account of that growth at the treatment plant? So that's kind of a big picture on it. I've got up here what we'll be looking at is a background scope, and then like I said, we'll look at the existing treatment plant evaluation. We looked at long-term evaluation, and then I'll take some questions at the end. Excuse me. The wastewater plant right now has a rated capacity of 9 MGD, that's 1 million gallons a day. Currently, the flows are around 4 MGD, so you'd say, well, it sounds like it's fine to go. You're about half the capacity of the plant. But one of the things that happens on a frequent basis is you get peak flows during rainstorm events, and that's called infiltration and inflow into your sewers, or what they call it I&I. And that can cause peak flows of up to 15.5. So if your normal dry weather flow is a 4, on these storms, it can more than triple the flow to a treatment plant. So it triples during storm events. In fact, we did some analysis in there, and if you had a 1-inch rain, that can generate about an extra 5 million gallons, almost the whole normal flow, just from a 1-inch rainfall. So that's causing issues at the plant, including some bypassing, because some of these units can't handle that kind of a flow. Some of the existing equipment is deteriorated. There's portions of this plant date back to 1962, so they're 50, 60 years old. There's a lot of times that equipment's run out, and they're at the end of their useful life. So I'll talk a little bit about that. There's new organic compounds in the permit that you have now, and these are some of these exotic things that you hear about, these chlorinated compounds. There's not Gen X in there, but there's other compounds, one called 1,4-dioxane, which is it's basically, really, the source is industrial sources on that. So those kind of compounds, you got to take a look at them to see if it's worthwhile to treat them at the plant or to do source control. And I'll kind of give you the answer ahead. It's better to do source control. And then one of the big ones is that they're anticipating what they call total nitrogen and total phosphorus limits in the future. And right now the plant can't meet that. And those are happening all over the state. You're seeing that happening in the Tar River. You're seeing it happening in the Neuse River. It's just kind of catching up to this area now. They're kind of moving to this area now. So Michael is expecting in the next permit cycle that they very well could have these limits, and the plant was not designed to meet these limits. It just wasn't.
You mentioned the Tar River and the nitrogen. Is that more industrial or agrarian or?
Well, it's basically they do a study of the whole river, and they figure out how much nitrogen and how much phosphorus can the river handle.
They obviously have a lot
overall,
more than we
and
do.
it's a mixture of municipal, and agriculture. They don't really limit agriculture that much, and it's hard to get at it. It's hard to get at it. So the scope is listed here in terms of what our plan scope was, and there's a liquids and solids train. I'll talk a little bit about that, but we did a scope of work to look at the liquids and solids train at the treatment plant, to assess the existing equipment, to look for future needs, and that's always kind of a crystal ball. And in this case, we're looking 20 years ahead, near term in the next 5 years, 20 years ahead, and then 50 years ahead. And then we wrote the master plan. So I know it's a little bit of a small figure here, but basically I talked about a liquid train and a solid train. On the left-hand side, you see here, that is what I call liquid train. That's to treat the water, basically. You treat the water, and this plant uses it's biological treatment, so it's bacteria. And as part of that biological treatment, what it produces is a sludge, which is on the right-hand side. If you look at this plant on the left, the center part of that is what I was talking about, is kind of the older part. It's 1960s. Trickling filters is an old technology. There's primary clarifiers a little bit more down to the south of that. When you look at this wastewater treatment plant, the water flows on the left-hand side from the lower left-hand part of the figure up to the right, and up. And it goes through what they call primary clarification, trickling filters, nitrification basins, and then it goes through a final filter, it's called a tertiary filter, and it gets chlorinated with chlorine. That's the left-hand side. The right-hand side is the way you deal with your sludge right now is you pump it out of the tanks where it collects. It goes into what they call a digester. Basically, the sludge kind of eats itself. And then before that, you have a thickening thing called a DAF, which is basically just to make the sludge thicker so it'll be easier to treat in the digester. And then it goes to what they call a sludge dewatering, which is kind of in the lower center of the picture. And then when you dewater your sludge, you store it and you bring it for land application. That's kind of a nutshell what the plant is. Like I said, the thing that happens right now when you're at 4 mg, your average flows, the treatment's pretty good. When you hit that high peak flows, some of the units will get bypassed. And that's kind of what this is talking about right here, is when we hit those peak flows, you have the influence screens. There's basically 5 different processes that are overloaded, 5 out of the plant. So that's quite a few of them that are overloaded when the rain comes. So that's a problem that has to be addressed. And there's a problem, existing problem right now. The treatment capacity is really less than 9 mg for a couple of these units. The old tricking filters and nitrification clarifiers, there's a couple of these units that really aren't rated for 9 after doing an evaluation of it. And then there is no treatment now for permanent organics. And really, some of the organics that are chlorinated, and the way they are produced are made in the plant. Usually those are more on the water treatment side of things. But in a treatment plant like this, you're adding chlorine at the end of the plant. And sometimes there's some residual compounds. There's some sugar water that's added from an industry. And there's some other compounds that may be in landfill leachate that's coming in that reacts with that chlorine and makes these what they call chlorinated organics. There's also, if you ever heard of 1,4-dioxane, that's another one of these chemicals, and it's a very hard to break down chemicals. It doesn't biologically break down, so you put in a biological plant, it doesn't do any good. So that particular chemical, we've recommended that you get it at the source, which they're doing right now. The pretreatment program is actively doing that. On the sludge side of things, there's what they call a DAF, which is a thickening unit. It has really, you say it's a 9 MGD plant, but it really has a 5.5 MGD capacity, that particular unit. So it's about half of what the plant is actually rated for. So that particular unit has been overloaded in the past. Actually, on occasion, they've had to overflow it to another tank to do the treatment for that. The digesters, like I talked about, that was a 6 MGD capacity too. So what happened is as they upgraded the plant over time, and some things they upgraded to 9 and some they didn't. That's kind of the bottom line. The dewatering portion of it, where you take the sludge after it's digested and you squeeze the water out of it and make it less to take into the fields, that particular, that was upgraded recently, and that's in good shape, actually. So our action items on that, I guess I'll back up for a minute. The action item on the liquid train is to try to take care of these peak flow events that happen. That's in the next 5 years. That's a near term what we're talking about. And for the sludge train is to do sludge thickening upgrade for this DAF unit that's overloaded. And also there's a covered storage area. There's one covered storage area now where after they press the sludge, they just pile it up and the rain doesn't get at it because it's covered. There's a second storage area that doesn't have a cover. So you spend money to squeeze the water out of the sludge, and then you put it onto a pad, and it rains on it. So and that's what we have in there is another near term that is to cover that sludge so it doesn't just get wet again.
Carl, on the action for the liquid train, it's UV disinfection for those new chemicals, or is that a more modern technology?
It's a more modern technology, but one of the main reasons is there's what they call a chlorine contact tank, and that when you add chlorine, it has to have time to react with the bacteria to kill them, and that tank has not big enough for the flows that you're getting. The peak flows, it's not big enough. In fact, he has to feed some chlorine ahead of that tank to the filters, ahead of the filters, in order to give them contact time.
So UV doesn't.
UV doesn't need,
Disinfection like chlorine.
UV uses electricity, basically. It's like you remember the black lights, in the 70s, whatever. It's kind of like that. It's a UV light, and it kills the bacteria with light. It disrupts their DNA.
Can we use our methane for this electricity?
Well, that's a,
If we don't
right
have,
now,
if we don't have peak flow and slow down the aerobic digestion.
well, the digesters do have extra methane capacity, but to turn on the electricity is pretty expensive. What they're using it now is to heat the sludge for the process, so it's a self-sustaining thing right now, the digester. So that's a good thing. A lot of times you don't see that. There was a study a while ago looking at trying to use that gas, but it was
Clearly,
expensive.
infiltration is going to have to be addressed.
Pardon?
Infiltration will have to be addressed.
I think that would be a good idea.
At that humongous number.
So we're looking at, so this is like in the near term, kind of, okay? In addition to that, I'm not going to go over all this stuff that's in this slide, just to illustrate kind of what we did to look at the assessment of age versus capacity. So on the whole plant, you look at all the equipment that's there, you look at all the units that are there, and you look at two things. One, is it gonna fall apart? Is it so old that it's ready to fall apart? And two, is it short on capacity? I mentioned some of them were shorter on capacity than the 9 MGD rating of the plant. So that's what that is. And this is only one page of about 5 pages. And we went through here and we looked at, what has to be replaced in 1 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, and then beyond 10 years. So that's what this was about. So it's a two-pronged thing. Look at the treatment requirements and looking at, is this piece of equipment falling apart because it's been there for 40 years?
We're gonna need additional land to accommodate this, or do we replace stuff that we already have in the same footprint, or?
Well, I'll get into that in a little bit.
All right.
Because this immediate upgrade we're talking about the next 5 years is right in this kind of schematic here. So you own that land that you have now, you own that, and you also own some land to the west of it, where those trees are, which I think actually are cut down now. So it's a little old picture here. But what we're talking about here is in the orange on this slide are units that basically need to have some replacements of equipment because it's old. Okay, so that's what the orange is. The blue in this slide is a treatment method, what I call peak side treatment, to try to address these peak flows. Before maybe you upgrade the whole plant, you address these peak flows so you don't have to deal with bypassing units and potentially busting your permit, exceeding your permit limits. So in this particular thing here we're talking about is down at the bottom, there's a pump station down there, and we would divert a good amount of the flow would go through the normal plant as it is, like the 5 or 6 MGD that's normally, the 5 MGD it's normally used to seeing. Then you would divert, there's a pump station at the lower left there, it's a blue block there, and you would divert flows over that amount up to 10 million gallons, because the 10 plus 15 million is like 10 plus 5. So you divert about 10 million, you go all the way around the plant up to the upper left-hand corner. There's a process that they make that you can, it's mostly a chemical treatment process, but you can like turn it on and off during storms, basically, and you add chemical. And then after that, we would put this UV disinfection I was talking about, and that would take care of the contact tank problem.
Presumably that additional peak flow is not as dirty a water.
Yes, right. When you get, yeah, exactly.
I mean, because
It's not,
it's infiltration, it's mostly.
yeah, it's not caused by people flushing their
It's not
sewers.
industrial waste.
It's not industrial waste. It's not people flushing their toilets. It's like, it's rainwater infiltrating into now, sometimes it can have some more dirt and things in it because it's.
And that diluted water, if it goes into the plant, actually harms the process of the plant as opposed to helping.
It can, yes, one of the things that is a big concern in the plant is you always have to keep your bacteria in the plant. And there's these things called all these clarifiers you see on here, and those things are in there to settle the sludge out and keep the bacteria in the plant.
And diluting is as bad. You'd think it'd be good to dilute the water, but it is not.
Well, they don't like it kind of like, I don't know how to explain it, but it dilutes the food and bacteria looking in the food and they can't find it as
They
easy.
throw your use block in the septic tank.
But it's a situation where when those peak flows comes, not only might you have to bypass some units, but if you blow, I'll use a word, blow the solids out of the plant, the bacterial solids, then you lose treatment. Later on, you gotta rebuild them up. So part of this strategy is you'll divert this flow around when it's diluted like you say. You can treat it chemically at that point, but you still send the normal amount of flow into the plant, treat it normally, and then you recombine those two flows back together, and then you go to this UV process we discussed a little bit earlier. Another reason for the UV process, besides the contact tank being too small, is that you won't be using chlorine anymore. And so these chlorinated compounds that are in the permit, they're made because you're adding chlorine to the water. Well, you won't be adding chlorine to the water, so that'll help to address those hard-to-treat compounds.
Maybe more byproduct.
Yeah, you won't have that byproduct so much anymore. So that's another benefit of this strategy that's listed here. Later on, we're going to go through costs. I know you all want to wait till the end, jump on the cost, but that'll be at the end of the presentation. Hopefully, I've answered the questions on this. Is it?
Are we doing we have a couple of source generators that system-wide, a couple of bad ones. Are we doing a pretty good job of treating at the source?
Are you talking about industrial sources?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Retreatment.
the landfill and there's StarPet are the ones that are,
Star-
the
yeah.
1,4-dioxane.
Yeah.
They're the ones at the source of that, more of that. And I know StarPet is taking measures to control that.
Spend a lot of their own money to
And I think it's
retreatment.
the landfill that would have to you have to probably step up enforcement on them.
Great, thank you.
I think that covers that part. So then, that's kind of the short-term parts of things is where we got this peak side stream treatment. I talked about sludge dewater and the sludge thickening to get that replaced. So now we go on to long-term. So what are we looking at in the long term? So the first thing to do, one of the first things to do is to figure out, well, what are you planning for? What flows and loads, what flows are you going to plan for in the future? So that's what this graph is all about. So the red line that's on this graph is your average daily flow. That's usually what a lot of times you'll design your plant based around that. The purple line is the maximum monthly flow. And normally you can adjust for that and design for that as you go along. But the flows in here, when we looked at a 2%, we assumed a 2% growth for Asheboro, for the town itself, for the city of Asheboro. There's also, we looked at, the industrial source is about 8 to 10% of the flow in this. The Asheboro is about 80% of the flow, 85% of the flow in these graphs. And then we had, at the time we started the study, we were looking at Randleman potentially pumping some of their wastewater to the Asheboro plant. Pardon? And so this includes some of that too. So it's a little bit extra maybe now, but we left it in there because it gives you a cushion.
From day to day, we're not sure.
So in this, we've got a long time frame here. It goes out 50 years from now. So normally you plan for 20 years. When I do a wastewater study, I'm planning for 20 years. And so I got that black line that goes up and down, and that's the 20-year line, okay? And so at that point, you're at about 6 million, and like I was saying, some of those units, like the digesters are 6 million, the trickling filters are 6 million. So some of the units in the plant, even though the plant was theoretically ready for 9, some of them are gonna hit their capacity around that time period. The question is, when do you expand? And the 50-year view is a pretty big crystal ball, right? That's looking out a long way.
Not particularly for a city that's 230 years old.
Yeah, okay. I stand corrected.
I mean, when you talk about planning for the future, we don't talk about 5 years and 10 years and 20 years.
Okay.
We're a city that's way over 200 years old. We have to plan.
Okay.
30.
Michael asked us to look out to 270.
Right. That's right.
Yep.
And so we looked out that far and probably in the year 2055 there is when you, the regulators that regulate, they look at your flow, and when your flow hits a certain percentage of the design capacity, then they say you gotta upgrade. And that's kind of when that point is where that step I'm showing going up, there's the treatment capacity is 9 million gallons across the end, and then you hit this step that goes up. And that's when you're expanding the plant again, I guess, the future expansion is in that time frame. And we did look at what it would take to expand, at that time too, looking at costs and such. One of the things to keep in mind here is even though the flows may look like you won't have to expand anything until 2055, as we kind of talked about before, is if this total land total P limits comes, you got to expand earlier anyhow, because you're for treatment reasons, not necessarily for flow reasons.
Well, you've got a tremendous amount of equipment listed here that won't last that long, so when you have to replace it, you just as well be going to.
Yeah, we're going to get into that in a minute, I guess. Yeah. So we looked at a number of long-term options, and again, we split them into liquid train and sludge train. And the liquid train, I'm not going to get into all the details in these, but the first two are basically treatment things at the end of what's already there. You're adding on to what's there to meet these future total N and total P limits, the total nitrogen. So those first two alternatives are like, let's add to what you've already got. And then the next two, the third, 3 and 4 are actually different, are more modern, I guess, treatment systems that would replace a lot of what you had on the plant. So that's kind of, and after we did a extensive review with Michael and the wastewater treatment plant staff, and their selection was to go with the conventional BNR system, which is basically almost a lot of the plant would be replaced, basically. As part of this also, I talked a little bit about digestion. You got to take care of the sludge. And so at that same time, if you're upgrading it for the total land, total P, you're going to upgrade it for the sludge too. And you're going to add this digester, what we're talking about here. One of the things they also want to look at was it's getting more and more difficult to get rid of your sludge out in the fields and things. And so part of the study was to look at making a Class A sludge, which means you treat it further than you do now. And you make it more inert, I guess you could say, than what it is now. And so as part of that, we looked at a number of different alternatives, but it really came down to looking at some drying technologies, drying the sludge basically further. You dewater it first. They call it a cake. If you think of a cake, right? You eat a cake. Believe it or not, after you dewater, it kind of looks like a cake, believe it or not. But this would dry it even further until it looks more like a dry product, more like a soil kind of. So that's kind of what that does. And looking at that, we looked at different options for that, including space requirements, costs, and there's a thing called a screw dryer, which actually has a screw in it.
Is it a compostable product?
It could be used, well, it depends on
It depends on your heavy metals.
yeah, it depends on certain things. I can't say right offhand one way or the other what it would be. The screw dryer has a heated screw in it, so the sludge kind of just gets conveyed by a heated screw and it gets dried as it goes. And then it's, the other thing about drying that's good is it reduces the volume. So I was talking about how they had 2 cake storage areas, one covered and one uncovered. Well, after the 5-year program, hopefully you have 2 covered ones at that point. But one of the things this helps with is it kind of extends the life of those covered storage areas. You don't have to necessarily expand them as fast. You wouldn't have, it buys life for those covered storage areas. And looking through it, realistically, we need to probably add we'll add another generator when the next upgrade comes. So they got one generator that can operate most of the plant, but not all of the plant. It operates the equipment that keeps the water flowing through the plant, but that's all it can do. It doesn't necessarily work on the sludge end of things as much or work on certain other parts. So that's what a generator is right now. So as part of the 1 to 5 year program, we had a generator then because the UV does add a power draw. So this this is kind of I know it's kind of a big picture and everything, but just in general, this is this BNR future selection that's in the master plan right now. And this would need to be implemented, I'm saying in the 5 to 10 year period from now. And Carl, why are you saying that? Well, because the next permit application will come out. Michael hasn't gotten the permit yet, but assuming that total P and total N limits are in that permit, they usually give you 3 to 5 years to design and plan, you know, an upgrade to your plant, and then you have to meet it in that next permit cycle. So when that comes out, we're going to be in this time period 5 to 10 years from now. So that's why that time period is chosen in here. And in here, it's kind of, the blue is what would be the new plant, really. And what's in the pink would more or less would be able to abandon that portion of the plant. So as you can see when you look at it, yeah, we're almost replacing the whole plant. A lot of the sludge processes can stay, and I'll get into that in a minute, but as a bottom line is, on the left-hand side, there's room to build what we're showing there within the property line, so your question about needing extra land is you can build it there. So you don't have to go out and acquire new land for this. All that stuff up there is up on a hill. It's a pretty big hill, and there's a lot of rock there. So the demolition of rock and stuff will make it an expensive project, because up on that hill, there's a lot of rock. So, but in general, this is, you know, just to kind of give an overall view. Now, on the right-hand side, you still have that peak flow system that you had put in earlier. It's still available to divert peak flows if you need to do that. So that would still be available at that time.
Your studies here so far, do they include any of the, what I'm hearing are called forever chemicals? Forever chemicals?
That's what this 1,4-dioxane is like, really. Right now, to treat those chemicals, a lot of that forever chemicals you hear about in water treatment right now, it's making its way into the wastewater world now. But as part of this project, I was contacting the vendors that do water treatment for like 1,4-dioxane, okay? And that's a new chemical, and so it's not, you know, the treatment technology is pretty new for that.
Still unregulated or about to be, or has it been regulated?
Well, the 1,4-dioxane and these bromine chlorinated compounds I'm talking about are already in your permit. They're already in there. Now, whether they'll there's this other chemicals called PFAS. You might hear about PFAS and Gen X. When do those get in?
They're unregulated.
When do those get in
Can
here?
those be treated now? Can those be treated?
Not with the plant you got now, and even on the wastewater side of things, you know, can anything be treated? Yeah, you know, if you had all the money in the world, yeah. But even with that, it takes multiple steps, and on the water treatment side, it's easier to do, because on the wastewater side, the water isn't quite as clean and it isn't quite as steady, I guess you could say. Like if you get these storms, you know, the water quality changes, and if you have an upset in your plant, the water quality changes, which you don't get so much in the water treatment plant side of things. So really, I think, you know, this next permit cycle will have those compounds in it. Whether they have any more in it, that would probably be the permit cycle after that. I don't know if that makes sense, but right now the cost of treating that is not justified at this plant. And if we do source control and we do this UV I'm talking about, that should handle what's in the permit now. Now, you can look at anything that's dealing with these forever chemicals is going to have to come at the very end of the plant. It's going to be tacked on at the end, because you have to have the cleanest water at that you can get for these other treatment methods to work. They almost got to be like, you know, because they're applied to water treatment plants now. So if you think of it, the way the industry's going now, and the way the technology is, it's really based on treating water at the end after water's treated. Well, it's going to have to treat the cleanest stuff at the end of the wastewater plant too. So this doesn't look at that, to be honest. I did look at some of the treatment methods for the 1,4-dioxane, and in reality, none of the equipment vendors would even provide a quote or anything. They won't even do it. They won't even give you a quote on the wastewater side. On the water side, they will, for the 1,4-dioxane. PFAS, that isn't actually as hard to remove as 1,4-dioxane. In reality, it's not as hard to remove as that. It still has to happen at the end of the treatment plant, though, and the cost per, you're talking nanograms. That's like one drop in an Olympic swimming pool, or one grain of sugar in an Olympic swimming pool. That's what you're talking about. Just to give you a perspective on it.
And that rule's good.
And this is the sludge side of things. So on the sludge side of things, with that drum thickener, that's the square in the middle there, that would have been put in the first 5-year period. And then I was talking about anaerobic digesters that have to be upgraded, so that's kind of what that's talking about right there. And the one thing about using the previous slide I had where you're going up on the hill to do your new treatment, apply your new treatment units in, that frees up. All these old treatment units can just be taken out of the ground and you can expand things down there. So that's what's going to help, in any future expansion, it'll help with that. So project, we were, part of the study was to develop a capital improvements program, CIP, and so for the town to consider, and that's what's listed here. So the top part of that table is this near term I'm talking about, the 1 to 5 year, and then the bottom part is the 5 to 10 year. That's why you see the years that are listed here. Now, some of these numbers are pretty high, and we've been seeing, in the last 3 years, we've been seeing a huge steep increase in it's inflation, it's a number of different things, but we've seen prices of even just like putting in force main tripled. The pandemic had a lot to do with that. There's still supply chain problems, all that. So a lot of these prices are related to that, like a result of that. So these will give you an idea of what kind of planning you'd have to do in terms of the cost for what we're talking about. And, I know these numbers are high, but a lot of different cities, towns, communities are seeing these same kind of numbers.
Just pick a line item there, for instance, just the first one, peak flow. And forget the subject matter, but is 420,000, that's what you think needs to be spent in 2024? In other words, is this cumulative? This is how much to be spent each year that you're showing?
Yeah, this would be like, in 2024, you'd spend 420, and then the idea there is you get the design going and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the design would spill over into 2025, and then you'd bid it, okay? And once you bid it, then the bigger costs come, because that's the contractor building it in 2026 and 2027. That's when they're building.
Accumulation of the progress payments.
Yeah, each of them, you're adding, all those, if you add those across the column, they add up to 16,500,000.
Yeah, and that's not the line that scared me so bad. I just thought I'd start with that one, because it would be easier to talk about.
But you don't have the cumulative total for each year. Right, going down.
Well, I didn't put that in there, I guess.
Yeah.
We can add that in. We can add the cumulative in for each year. But you'll see the same kind of pattern as when you first start out. The first year or second year is like design, design and doing things like that, and then the big costs hit a couple of years later when you actually are.
Clearly, if all this is done, there'll need to be grants or low-interest loans or bonds.
Right.
Just, whether it be from rural water, whoever, I don't know.
Right. And honestly, we weren't. Right. And that's a big challenge, of course. Finding show me the money. But the purpose of the study was to give you to kind of give you a roadmap is the purpose of the study, and that's what this kind of does. So I just want to thank Michael and Mike Wiseman, who's superintendent at the plant. Sarah Laughlin works in the pretreatment program, and then the rest of the city staff are helping us out on this.
And that's just at 9 million gallons a day.
Yes.
The,
The BNR, that's at 9 million gallons a day. Yep. We
and
did
that's-
look,
that's-
we did
that's
look at,
the-
we
That's
did.
the new system with the nutrient removal.
Yeah,
thing, but,
and so,
does,
the thing is, your flows aren't, it'd be 2055 is what I'm getting at, when the flows would go, so if you built that in 2042, then 10 years later, or well, 15 years later, whatever, 13 years later, you'd be looking at potentially expanding the plant to the 13 and a half that I had that I showed in that graph before. Now, in our study, we did look at that cost too, the next expansion, and part of the reason that the alternative was selected that was selected was that one would be easiest to expand and less expensive to expand than going with some of these other ones where you're just tacking stuff on the end. Because like you say, those other processes that you're tacking on that you're still using are just getting older and older and older. And so to go back and do the next expansion, what we found was that the cost for that, for the next expansion to 13.5 MGD, would almost offset any, resulted in that one option being, all the options pretty much being close in cost, once you take that.
We may need these capacities long before this timeline.
well, we also hear a lot of talk about regionalism and that sort of thing. And so my question to you is, as an expert on this matter, how dynamic is the economy of scale in a sewer plant? Does a 27 MGD run that much cheaper than a 9?
It will. I
And
don't
is
have,
it per
I don't have,
gallon
I don't have a
cheaper to
specific,
build?
we're seeing, the pricing we're seeing like for 5 to 10 million gallon plants like yours is like $25 a gallon. Used to be, for the same thing, used to be 15.
Well, we wouldn't have to get the waters clean either and hunt so many small chemicals.
But I mean, before the pandemic, pre-pandemic, if I had a plant and it was okay, you gotta do this total P and total N removal, I'd figure, $15, $17 per gallon. Now, 25, 30.
Well, 30's been the number that we've been throwing around at the regional.
Yeah, it's more like, and it's gotten that high, that's just what pricing has done. It's just gone up there.
And that's way more.
As engineers, we can't do anything about it, we just gotta tell you the bad news.
Pipeline to get it to a regional plant's not cheap either, so.
No, that's right, well, that pipeline
right
cost,
away
that
and
cost is
everything.
triple, or
And you
2.5.
gotta buy it.
What
when you
if we
find
got
it
the
now.
county and Randleman together? I mean, the county's wanting us to use our sewer all the time. Why don't we get them together to help out with this? Everybody, and then wouldn't the federal government, the state, be more likely to help out with this if it's a regional type plant? It just,
They do provide funding, points for funding if you're regionalizing a system.
Yeah, but then you also gotta throw in all those pump stations it's gonna take in this terrain too.
And you might have odor
Of course, I say
control.
that, you
law
gotta pump
enforcement.
more down to the beach than you do here, really, in a certain way. So, you're gonna pump.
Now, realistically, if the regulators can get rid of a permit, like you're saying, if they regionalize and when the plant shuts down, they don't have to deal with that permit anymore. They kinda like that, but.
well, Randleman, they probably got antique stuff up there too, right? I expect, I mean, so, and then in the county, I mean, we're taking county, they want us all the time, so that means they ought to get on this too. I mean, this costs too, the way I see it. I mean, just not all Asheboro paying for all of it,
Well, really, the river, Cape Fear Basin is still being evaluated, and those numbers really haven't been released. That's why Michael's having to wait for his permit, and we really are hearing rumors of really small numbers. So that means you have to treat it to really fine levels,
And everybody's got a moratorium.
That water quality is what drives your discharge level.
Yeah, so they hit the noose already, hit the tower already, now they're hitting the Cape Fear.
And everybody's under a moratorium at this point on the Cape Fear, on the Deep River. Rambleman, Ramshore.
I was just curious, but I think Dick Moore so famously said about the contrary to this regionalism, these towns value their independence.
It's very true. Very true.
Okay.
So there's that too.
Done?
Crazy too.
I took up a lot of your,
I
I
only
apologize
have
if I
one
took up a lot of
question.
your time. It's just a
I got
complicated
one
thing.
question for you, Carl.
Okay.
This is fascinating information, but why in the world would you go into sewer consulting?
That's a good question. I don't know. I just like it.
Know anybody that don't need it?
Well, I was thinking about that the other day, actually, and I was like, when I was a kid, I'd do puzzles, like 3,000-piece puzzles. And each treatment plant's like a puzzle. They're all different, and there's different pieces that go into them, and eventually you make the puzzle complete. And I didn't have that epiphany until about 2 years ago.
But it's still just a bunch of crap.
A lot.
But it's beautiful when it comes out.
Carl, I find it fascinating, so thank you.
It is
Appreciate your
fascinating.
attention.
All right, we'll move on to,
Thank you. And we do have, I know Carl, and we say this all the time, but Carl travels all over the southeast, and he'll tell you, we do have an outstanding group of folks up there.
Didn't need $31 million.
all right, 10B is gonna be just about as
Exciting.
Exciting, absolutely.
yeah, it's not gonna be particularly pleasing to talk about either.
I say buckle up.
I disagree with that. This one does sort of have a pot of gold at the end of upside down rainbow.
Not for us. We're gonna wholesale it for Ramseur, and Ramseur's gonna make the money.
I have to apologize. There is a digital copy of this presentation somewhere in virtual space right now. I didn't make it to here. So you're getting hard copies.
Then we just need to raise the wholesale price.
Did everyone get a copy? Okay. So I'm here to talk to you tonight about the resolution to establish the criteria for design build for the Wolfspeed Water Line Extension Project. And as you remember, in April, I came to you and you agreed to let us proceed with seeking service of an owner's advisor. We have done the advertisement for that and taken statement of qualifications. And happy to say that as of an email that I got before I walked in the door, we probably have an agreement close to being signed with HDR to represent us as our advisor on this project. They've been helping me with this criteria, just so you know, to get this project moving forward. So a lot of these criteria and justifications have been at their expertise. So hopefully we'll have the agreement signed tomorrow or next week.
Needs to, because they're announcing, they're still talking about 2025, having that plant open.
Yep, I've got an update on
I'm
when they're
sorry.
needing our
I'm
city.
jumping ahead of everybody.
We're in here, so.
Is it obvious I'm in a hurry?
I'm in a hurry too. I'm going to get through this, I promise. But for doing the design build criteria, there's a statute, the 143, 128, 1A, that requires you to establish the criteria. And you don't do this just one time. You have to do it for every single project. It has to be evaluated and looked at. So it's based on 6 items, and we're going to go through those. And I'm just going to list the content and then the justification for each one as we go.
You don't have a slide for that. You passed out this slide, right?
Yes, it's in there. It's in there. So the first criteria is the extent to which the government entity can adequately and thoroughly define the project requirements prior to the issuance of the RFQ. Our justification there is we are working with HDR. They are the owner's advisor group in the state of North Carolina. They've done lots of them. They're great. We actually had a debriefing with one of the other firms that came in. They came in and talked to me Tuesday. They said we knew HR was going to get it because they're the best. They even admitted it. So that's where we are. We've got the best. And they are going to help me develop this RFQ. I've already done a lot of work on it, and I'm going to hand it over to them and let them finish it up so we can get that out. So number 1, check. Number 2, the time constraints for delivery of the project. Mayor, they want water from Asheboro in Chatham County, January 1, 2026. That's when we have to have it there. So we cannot do a traditional design, bid, build project. You can't get it done in that amount of time.
And there are still 3 or 4 engineering firms working on
Well,
that?
with that, I have talked to about 5 different firms that are, 5 different teams that are planning to put together proposals for this project. So we're gonna have a good selection, or a good base to select from.
So one for the whole line or multiple?
You know, each
multiple?
team, there are some teams that have firms big enough they can do it by themselves. I've seen most teams have multiple firms working, yes, with a contractor.
A joint venture is very common.
And even they bring in their own real estate people to hire to do the easements and any land acquisition that's needed. So they build the whole team completely. It's all taken care of. And I've told them that we need that service too. So, and it will all be well defined in the RFQ. The RFQ is going to cover everything we need to send it out for their statement of qualifications.
I don't mean to be getting ahead of you. Go ahead.
Okay, no, you did good there.
No, it's perfectly legal.
Okay, so, but yeah, that's it. There's no other options here but to go to the design build.
And each of the team members is part of the total score.
Yes, yes. Okay, so number 3, we have to prove the ability to ensure that a quality project can be delivered. When you have our staff, we have one firm representing us, helping us represent our needs when the owner's advisor. You have a contractor that knows what they're doing in laying a water line. This is just strict pipeline in the ground. It's an easy job. And you have the design firm, this design firm. You've got a nice collaborative effort putting things together to get the job done. So that's really the best way to get a project done. And I'm probably going to skip ahead here too, but I'm looking almost all large utility projects, highway projects in the state of North Carolina now are all going design build. The traditional bid build design project, that format is gone. Charlotte doesn't do anything but design build anymore. It's just the quickest, best quality, best price way to go. So with that, the justification there is city staff with the owner's advisor and selected design build team can provide a collaborative approach to the project that will address the complex issues of time constraint, permitting, and funding administration. Permitting, we're going to have to deal with air quality, water quality, land and mine safety for erosion control. It's just the whole gamut of permitting with the state. It's all handled at one time. So it just streamlines the project. Moving on to number 4, criteria. We are required to show capability of a governmental entity to manage and oversee the project, including the availability of experienced staff or outside consultants who are experienced with the design build method of project delivery. Well, the reason I came to you in April was because I don't have that expertise. That's why we're hiring HDR to handle it. So that's how we're checking off that box. HDR is going to come in and provide that experience and expertise that we need to meet that criteria. Number 5. We have to show a good faith effort to comply with General Statutes 128.2 and 128.4 to recruit and select small business entities. Well, you as a council have adopted a minority and business goal of 10%. We do that in every construction project we do. We look for a 10% goal in every bid we put out. So that meets that requirement there. You already met it with your ordinance you passed.
Or a good faith effort, because that's going to be a tough goal on about a 3-item bid contract.
Yes. It is. It's very hard. We just have to show that we made the effort. Number 6, the criteria utilized by the government board, the city, including a comparison of the costs and benefits of using the design build delivery method for a given project in lieu of other delivery methods is identified. HDR helped work on this. They have looked at it and design build reduces the scope. Everyone's already looking at it at one time. You don't have the engineers looking at it one way, contractor looking at it one way, us looking at it a different way. We start all on the same page. It just saves time, saves money, and you go, pretty much you're already thinking about putting the pipe in the ground before you even start.
And the people that are judging you on this is the method they use.
Yes, yes. So that's our justification for that. So I think we've proven that we meet the criteria to do this for this job. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have about it.
We have a resolution.
Yep, I'm ready to go there if you're ready.
Questions? I will say that it was in the news this past week. Wolfspeed developed a carbon silicon wafer. They don't build the chip.
It's the wafer, you're correct.
Japanese people build the chip with the Wolfspeed, wafer.
Correct.
And the Japanese firm just signed an agreement to help, to give Wolfspeed $2 billion to build that plant.
Well, maybe that'll help a little.
So that just means that come January 1, they're gonna want that plant
I
open.
think so. Well, they're gonna have some other hurdles beside getting water from us. I assure you, there are other hurdles still out there. So,
Ought to see the
Yeah.
size of the buildings in
The
the
other, the other big hurdle is what they gonna do with the sewer.
that's the one I'm talking about. There's no solution yet, so.
All right, so.
Let me ask you this.
Let the Ramseur rock quarry.
Okay.
Let
Yes.
me ask you this. What's the situation on the intake valve at Lake Lucas? I mean, are we gonna have that completed by the time they're gonna have the water flowing? I mean,
At this time, no, we hope to hear from, Division of Water Infrastructure. They usually make their announcement this week or next on the funding for that. We did apply for funding for that project in the spring application process, so we should know in the next week or two.
We just kind of put that project off till we get funding.
So,
Or somebody else to give us funding.
we're gonna need that to have the water to send over, right?
we should have the capacity to handle this demand
Without,
that.
But there's also,
In
the state budget bill, there's, $7 million to connect Asheboro's system with Random and Dam system, so
Okay, I was wondering about
that
that,
gives you two, we get gives us two ways to get to
okay, so that'll be done about the same time, then we'll be hooked on to Roundman about the same time as it's working to.
The PTRWA project's supposed to be ready to, people we know have worked on it, so it's supposed to
Yeah.
be pretty ready.
The engineer for that project's in the room right now, so.
That may not be necessary with our capacity for phase 1,
Correct.
but, by the time we get to phase 2, we're gonna have to have an additional source.
And the county wants water on the other end too, so,
And High Point, Greensboro, been hooked to it for years. so
yeah.
No big deal.
Okay.
So,
Other questions?
okay, questions?
Go right
Good
ahead.
question, though. Those were some good questions Bill had.
Very good. So, I am now here to ask you to adopt this resolution by reference.
Council?
Mayor, I move we adopt a resolution establishing the design-build delivery method by reference.
Have a motion by Mr. Bell to adopt by resolution upon recommendation of the staff. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Burks. You've been active tonight.
He's got a birthday party to get to.
All in favor, say aye.
I'm having mine, he's gotta get to his.
Whose birthday?
Wow.
Today? Yeah. And you came here?
She
wasn't
home, I
That's commitment. That's commitment. Oh, by the way, I appreciate you signing up to run again. Okay, all in favor say aye. We already had that. All opposed say no. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Resolution is approved. Thank you, Michael. There are big things coming down the pipe. No pun intended. Mr. Leonard, item 11A is petition from Duke Energy to annex their 4 parcels down in New Century Business Park.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item was presented at the June council meeting. Resolution has been properly advertised, and now it's time for a public hearing.
Questions of Mr. Leonard? All in favor, I'm sorry, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Then, Mayor, that motion would be on the ordinance extend the corporate
So
limits.
yes, sir. So, annexation ordinance has been prepared by the city attorney, making, the effective annexation date or effective upon adoption, and staff recommends adoption by reference.
Okay, were you
So moved.
you were the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Ms. Heath, discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Just for the, press, that is, where they're gonna be relocating their, business office, their engineering office and their storage yard, which is out here on Trogdon Hill that got cut off by the new bypass. And
64 East.
And they'll be using that, they'll be abandoning that and moving down behind the jail in New Century Business Park.
And that's their operations group.
Yep.
How many people approximately do they work, do you know? Will they work out of that?
I don't know, it'll be a pretty good lick on the property tax base.
Good.
All the equipment's down there.
Yeah, they got all that storage and they got a substation out there, don't they?
Yeah, but it'll stay there, but the folks
But,
won't.
and the folks they'll build an office building and also it'd be good to have them in the city limits. All right, whoa, that was a public hearing and I didn't do it. Was there anybody in the room that wanted to address the council? I am off my game tonight. You all right, Jeff?
We're okay.
We good?
You asked if anyone had any comments, so we took that as being,
Well, the room's empty except for staff.
I was being judicious in what I said, so.
Okay. And we passed the ordinance to extend the corporate limits. Okay, you have 11B, which is a petition from Bernice and Dennis Spoon and Ardani Nolasco concerning 2 parcels of land near the intersection of Highway 42 and Patton Avenue.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is 2 parcels, one containing .245 acres and the other containing .31 acres. This petition was received by the NCDOT. Item was presented at the June City Council meeting as well. A resolution has been properly advertised, and now it's time for the public hearing.
And I will open the public hearing. A little late. Is anyone in the room that would like to address council regarding this request? Any questions of Mr. Leonard? Do I have a motion?
Mayor, I move we adopt the ordinance extending the city limits by reference.
I have a motion by Mr. Bell. May I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Swears. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Item 11C, petition received from Darren Lucas requesting contiguous annexation of a parcel of land located at the intersection of Crestview Church and Road and Zoo Parkway.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is for 9.921 acres. This item was also presented at the June council meeting. The resolution has been prepared and properly advertised, and now it's time for the public hearing.
I was just noticing this doesn't call for a public hearing.
Oh,
No.
sorry.
This is the first one to investigate.
A resolution has been directing the city clerk to post the public hearing.
Okay. Questions? Do I have a motion?
Mayor, I'll move that we approve this resolution directing the city clerk to investigate the annexation petition by reference.
I have a motion by Ms. Heath. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Burks. Okay. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Item 2, there under C2 is consideration of a resolution setting the date for a public hearing on the question of annexation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. City Attorney has, in light of your action, the City Attorney has prepared a resolution setting the public date for the August 10th, 2023 City Council meeting. Staff recommends adoption by reference.
Questions? Do I have a motion?
Mayor, I'll move that we approve this resolution setting the date for a public hearing on the question of annexation for the Crestview Church Road and Zoo Parkway intersection. annexation
Thank
by
you, Ms. Heath. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Burks. Questions? Discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. Item C2 is approved. All right, item 12, you have a handout, a late handout, regular agenda, item number 12. It says Wake Forest at the top. This is ordinance on deer hunting, right?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'll just, if you don't mind, I'll just elaborate. It's Wake Forest for the first 2 pages. The next page after that is town of Lenore, and beyond that is Sanford. Staff's not making any particular recommendation, but these were given out for you to have, to give us guidance on how you would like to proceed. And with your permission, Mr. Mayor, I'll just state, for example, one of the highlights of the things we want to get your feedback on is that Wake Forest, you'll see in the first part where to show the example of the variation, the second highlight where it has number 2, seasons, Wake Forest talks about a fall deer season, and then they talk about the urban archery season. If you turn to the page, which would be the 3rd page, you turn to Lenore, theirs is labeled just urban archery deer hunting. And if you turn to the one on Sanford, it's labeled urban archery deer hunting. So one of the questions we want guidance on is that are you more inclined to allow the fall regular deer hunting season with the bow to occur and use the urban archery program to supplement, because urban archery is basically from roughly January to February, and what prevents the regular archery season from working inside the city now or any other city is that the ordinance that prohibits the discharge of firearms also prohibits the discharge of crossbows, bows and arrows, anything like that.
Any projectile.
Any projectile. And so one of the ordinance provisions that can be, and like I said, we're not recommending staff, we're just learning from you what your policy preferences are, is that do you want to state that there is a provision that allows for the use of a bow and arrow inside the city limits for deer hunting only, not allowing firearms, which is what you'll see is some of the provisions in these examples that have been provided to you. And so therefore, if you have a state license and the city council has authorized the use of the bow and arrow inside the city for deer hunting, it would be that season plus the urban archery season, which is an additional time, like I said, usually January, February for that. We'd have to apply, my understanding as we double check, is usually you have to apply by April 1st of each year to get included in that next urban archery season, but that's separate. And you can notice the others say focus. This one with Wake Forest talks about getting a permit from the town. The others do not do that. One other interesting thing that's just as a policy preference that shows how it can work. If you look at the one for Lenore, they say hunting is allowed only on a tract or parcel of land which is at least 3 or more acres. Adjacent tracts or parcels of land may be combined or pooled to meet this requirement with written permission from each landowner. They have it at 3 acres. It's 5 acres for Wake Forest, but they can also allow you to pool. But as an example, when you go over to Sanford, Sanford says hunting is only allowed on a tract or parcel of land which is 3 or more acres. Tracts or parcels of land may not be combined or pooled to meet this requirement. So that's an example of the variation.
It's all over the board.
And that's what we're just looking for guidance of what policy preferences you have.
Obviously, you've done a lot of research here. Mr. Batten gave us this additional resource. Would you be amenable, or staff be amenable to reaching out to this wildlife biologist for the state and at least getting his feel, any suggestions he may have and whatnot.
We're certainly happy to follow your guidance. That's the whole purpose in being here is what are your policy preferences for us?
I'd like to know more about
If
that.
we're gonna do it, I'd like to do it as the best way and completely as possible so that we don't find ourselves getting bitten on the butt by something we overlooked or didn't think of. And this wildlife biologist apparently for our division, being as Mr. Batten said, the guru or the expert, and only will work with us if we ask him to. It might be worth a request.
Did I hear you say that the timeframe's not until April anyway? Is that
For the urban season, yes, sir. My impression is you have to apply by April 1 in advance
But
of when
there
it
is
was
a
coming up.
like traditional bow season, black powder.
Handgun.
During the fall, you have the tradition.
Coincide with traditional bow season.
But there can be an urban archery season too, in and of itself, right?
Correct. And that's where,
That's when you're talking about the January, February timeframe.
and that's where you need to be careful in how you phrase the ordinance, because if you're just focused on the urban archery, it may be that you're just setting up to, I'm just saying as a hypothetical, you could be setting up where you've just authorized the urban archery season, but you haven't addressed whether or not you are allowing the use of the bow to hunt during the regular season for archery, and still making it clear in the ordinance that you're not allowing the use of firearms, as an example of what can go on. And then you gotta decide what your concerns are about density.
At the risk of making more enemies, I will say, as I've said many times up here, we're not known for following the damn rules.
So, the other issue that council has is now's not season, so you've got two deer out there. You can't, it's not urban archery season, it's not traditional bow season, they're just, you have to work in that window. It's not an open season to shoot any deer you see in the yard.
Any ordinance provision that staff would present to you would say anyone trying to avail themselves of that provision has to comply with all applicable federal and state regulations. And we certainly aren't advocating, just giving it as an example, you'd have to have the proper license from the state Wildlife Resources Commission. One town wanted to add their own permit. We certainly are not advocating trying to add another layer of permitting. That's just an example of what has been done.
Although I like the idea of knowing who's hunting in our town.
Correct. I mean, that's.
They are, but I get what you're saying.
It's but we're certainly happy to go with the policy preference of the governing board. Just to throw another wrinkle to that, I thought Chief Lineberry had a very good observation. He said in our conversation, we were talking about this, and he made the comment that he did think it was a good idea to pay attention, and I agree, to pay attention of, if you want to allow the bow, the traditional bow, like the compound bow, do you want to prohibit using the crossbow? Because that could have a difference on the amount of what people are using and accidental discharge and how far it goes and that sort of thing, as opposed to the traditional bows. That's the level of regulation that we can get
It wasn't
into.
that long ago, we had somebody shooting arrows in the backyard and hit a car.
Yeah.
The last time this came up, that was the issue.
Crossbows are
Dangerous.
pretty dangerous. They fly very rapidly.
And at one point, they actually were brought under, the law has changed now as far as on pistol purchase permits, but because of issues with crossbows, they actually were brought in within the scope of the old pistol purchase permits.
When I was growing up, crossbows were outlawed in North Carolina. So, I think you have your marching orders.
What's your thoughts on the combined tract? Looks to me like 3 acres is 3 acres, but I can see where agreements or disagreements,
That's one of those.
How big's your deer problem, I guess, is the real answer to some of these questions.
Right. And that's why I wanted to highlight, there are plenty of examples where they allow you to pool, but Sanford obviously took a different tack on that. And that's a policy choice that I want to make sure we get the guidance from the policymakers.
Not allowing the pool would help our regulatory efforts, and I think it would make us feel a little safer.
And if you look at like a regular hunting thing, you have to have landowner's permission to be on that person's property to hunt. If it's not your property. So that's kind of like, and this last time we brought this up, and we used Sanford as an example for us, and at that point, Sanford said 10 acres. Well, to get 10 acres, I mean, that's just ridiculous. You can't get that in an urban.
Not in the city limits.
Yeah.
Well said no.
Yeah, just as well said no. So, I see that, obviously, 10 acres wasn't working for Sanford back then, so they're now down
I'd
to
take
30.
my 2/10 of an acre and put it with your 3 acres and.
Yeah.
and
Yeah, the
everybody
HOA can have a hunting resort.
And
All right,
I don't particularly like the crossbow. I would prefer, you're very intentional when you're firing from a standard bow. A crossbow is just as dangerous as a pistol, and you accidentally hit the trigger and it's gone, and you're in trouble.
Right.
It has no conscience once it leaves.
And when Mr. Turner gets started, South Asheboro's gonna get flooded. It's numerous now of what's going on.
And it is pretty consistent with using elevated platforms to try to make sure you're shooting down.
Yeah, you need to be elevated. That needs to be part of our.
I'll take it then that we'll follow up with the biologist.
thank you very much. All right, let's move on. Mr. Sugg, item 13, you will request authorization to publish notice of intent for the city council to enter a lease agreement with County Board of Education for use of transmitter space on city-owned property.
Yes, sir. This is, unlike the last item, this is a specific request where I would need a motion if you're so willing to do that. The city has had a lease agreement for 10 years. It's coming up to its end with the Randolph County Board of Education. The city has a tower that it uses for its own purposes for transmitting on Dave's Mountain. There's a water tank. It's a secured site. Use it for municipal operations. The city has not opened up and allowed anybody else to get on that tower, trying to maintain the residential nature, not create a disturbance in the area, so we limit the access. But roughly 10 years ago, the Board of Education came to the city and stated that location would be extremely helpful and is vital to their ability to use the tower to set up communications with their buses. So from there, they can maintain communications with the buses. They very much want to maintain that level of communication, and having the discussions with them, they're happy to stick with the terms that have been in place for the past 10 years. And speaking with Mr. Ogburn, the city being partners with the County Board of Education and the school buses is, from a staff perspective, willing to continue on. It's $3,000 annual rent. They're willing to keep paying that, and it'd be for another 10 years. But under the state statute, we have to advertise, get a 30 days advertisement in advance of your intent to renew the lease. So if it's agreeable to you, I'm asking for authorization to publish that notice and come back to you once notice is done to renew the lease for another 10 years.
Anybody have any difficulty with this? Okay, you have consensus.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're down to the upcoming events. There's a concert tomorrow night.
We got it, wherever it went to.
The Petty Breakers are tomorrow night at Bicentennial Park. Cooking with a Cop is Thursday, July 20th and Thursday, July 27th. 2 locations, one different each day. Sunset Theater, Star Spangled Girls,
Saturday night.
Vivo, what is Vivo? What is that? Tuesday, July 18th, come out and find out. And the Hatley Family Band on Tuesday, July 18th, from 10, 1, and 7.
They're with Vivo.
Okay. And then the Petty Breakers, which is a Tom Petty tribute band tomorrow night. Mason Lovett Band Saturday, Sunday, July 23rd. Ace Party Band, Sunday, August 6th. National Night Out is Tuesday, August 1st, and that will be at the YMCA because our soccer park is not quite ready for occupancy. And the American Legion Southeast Regional Playoffs begin on Wednesday, August 2nd. On the night of the 1st, all the teams will be downtown. We're going to host them for dinner at the rec center. From there, they'll go back out to the ballpark for a Zookeepers ball game, and then they'll start playing next morning at 10 o'clock, I believe.
So on that Tuesday night, the 1st, the city will host the players, the coaches, the referees, and the American Legion staff.
Parents are on their own.
Parents are, Addie Quarter has asked to make sure that the restaurants downtown are open for the parents. So we kind of get, so that'll be a fun night, and then, the players will be excited. The folks from American Legion headquarters are really excited about coming. Our commissioner actually lives in Sturgis, South Dakota, doesn't he? So,
He loves coming here because he leaves town. Sturgis is going on the week he comes here.
That's good.
He leaves his wife at home to make money for next year, and he comes out here and does baseball.
I've been to both. He's missing a sight.
All right, okay, and right now, tonight, the American Legion team is involved in a best-of-5 series, home and away series with Rowan County. They started tonight away.
Right.
Tomorrow night home. Saturday night here.
Yeah.
And
Then
then
two in a row.
Sunday is Faith Night at the Zookeepers.
Yeah.
At 5 o'clock. I knew it was an earlier time, and at some point in time, we may be playing Legion ball here, unless they decide to swap home games. And that could be 2 o'clock Sunday afternoon, but anyway, let's hope we can win. We get a bid for the Southeast Regional, whether we win the state championship or not, because we're host. But it'd be nice to go into the regionals as state champion.
Mayor, just one thing, staff-wise, congratulations to our Director of Information Technology, Todd Stout, whose daughter is getting married this weekend. And I think all of you know Todd, and Todd's son. Austin is our golf pro. So congratulations to them. Todd's been up, you've seen him the last couple of weeks, he's been pretty stressed out, and he has another daughter to go.
All right, everybody has an update to your city code. If you know where your notebook is, there are directions in here to tell you how to swap the pages. I haven't seen my notebook in probably 7 or 8 years, sorry.
I just asked.
All right, anybody, in the interest of almost 10 o'clock, which is probably shorter than we expected to be here, does anybody have anything for the good of the cause?
Just like to wish Mr. Brown a happy early birthday, and Andre a happy birthday, and Walker happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Robert.
Jeff's got one coming up too.
Jeff, when's your birthday?
It's back on June 30th. It was June 30th.
June 30th.
Belated happy birthday.
We missed your birthday?
It was fine.
And congratulations to Jeff's son, who graduated airborne school.
Yeah.
Very good. Paratrooper, Ranger, on guard for us. Proud of you.
Staff, I appreciate the work y'all do. Everybody. Appreciate the newspaper and news media being here. John, nice to have you hang around till the end. And I guess we'll just call it a night. Thank you very much.
Zookeepers are up 9-7 in the bottom of the 8th.
Yeah, well, I'm more concerned about the American Legion.
Look to that one.
Are they on full baseball?
I know. Radio.
I apologize tonight, guys. I had
Thanks, everybody.
had my mind on